Jon McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
According to psychologists, rage is an inborn behavior that every person exhibits in some form. Rage is often used to denote hostile, affective, reactive aggression. Rage tends to be expressed when a person faces a threat to their pride, position, ability to deceive others, self-deceptive beliefs, or socioeconomic status. That's from the Wikipedia definition on the emotion of rage. Yes, we are going to go down the rabbit hole of rage today. We'll be learning what it is, how it affects our minds, our bodies, our lives. We're going to talk about triggers of rage, and then what we can do all about it. So, if you're listening live, we want to hear from you and what your experience is with rage. So please put comments in the chat as we go through our discussion today. So choo, choo, choo. All aboard the MTM Rage train today. Destination awareness, which is the birthplace of change. Choo, choo. Let's go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Men Talking Mindfulness. I'm William Schneider. Joined by my brother from another mother, Jon McCaskill, over there in Colorado Springs. Each week, Jon and I break down and demystify an aspect of mindfulness and make it meaningful to you. I'm stoked to have a solo episode today with Jon. We've been rocking through season 5, so thank you so much for joining us today and listening to our other episodes in the past. Like we had Keegan Gill on last week, which is one of the best triumphant stories I've ever heard in my life. And the week before that, we had our biggest celebrity guest, author Stephen Kotler, on. And so thank you. We are growing. Even on July 31st, we had our best one day, biggest downloaded one day. So thanks again for sharing, spreading the MTM love, and bringing it to your friends and to the world. Jon, how are you? Good to see you, my brother.
I'm well, brother. Yeah, very excited to get in this conversation. Rage is something that we all deal with. Rage is something that can really, put a damper on a relationship, put a damper on how we feel about things. And there's other sides to rage too. And we're going to kind of look at both sides of that coin today. But before we do that, I want to get into the announcements. We've been talking about this for a while, and we're going to continue talking about it until we actually do it. But we've got a retreat coming up. We've teamed up with Movement RX and Dr. Teresa Larson to put on our mindfulness adventure retreat. And that's September 16th through the 19th in beautiful Durango, Colorado at the Colorado Trails Ranch. And this retreat, it's going to include a follow-on 4-week integration program. If you book this retreat before 10 August, you get $200 off. And if you're part of an organization that books 4 or more, you get $500 off per person. We'd love to have you join us. So if you want to learn more, head over to mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat, or listen to Will, Teresa, and myself talking about it on our most recent episode. That said, if you're tuning in for the first time, never been, a guest, or rather a part of the audience for Men Talking Mindfulness, the way that we do this, we kick it off with a mindfulness meditation at the beginning. We end it with a grounding practice at the end, kind of bookend the show, both to calm ourselves down and to calm you guys down as the audience, because I know you're super excited to be here with us.
Yeah.
So that said, I'm going to lead us off in this first practice. And I see Philip Mann says, Jon looks like he just climbed out of the pool working out for the big one. I did, in fact. I climbed out of the lake earlier, so that's why I look a little crazy. But
no, you look beautiful, Jon. I love
now I
love
need
the
some
raw,
grounding. Now I need some
right? The vulnerability just by your appearance. Love it.
Yep. So, all right. So that said, get into a position that is safe and comfortable for you. And let's just bring our attention to our breath, focusing on the physical sensations of each breath, each aspect of each breath, the inhalation and the exhalation. And even in leading this, I could feel some tension in my forehead, in my eyes, in my face. And as soon as I brought my attention to the physical aspects of each breath, I could feel that tension melting away. So try to do the same for yourself, bringing your attention to your breath to relieve physical and or emotional tension. Note how the air feels as you breathe it in, and how it feels as you breathe it out. Notice what each breath in does to and for you. Your lungs expanding, chest expanding, belly expanding on the breath in, and on the breath out, the reverse. Lungs, chest, belly shrinking, contracting. Feel that. Find your breath in the here and the now, tuning out the noise of the past and the future, other places and other times. You are here, you are now. And note any emotions that you may be experiencing now. Even in a short grounding meditation like this, you may notice emotions bubbling up. Relief, frustration, boredom, and your mind may have even wandered off to some other place in some other time. And if that's the case, that's okay. Just bring it back. Bring it back to the here and now, listening to my voice and paying attention to your breath and your emotions. Right here, right now, nowhere else, no time else. And we'll conclude with 2 deep cleansing breaths together. Begin by breathing out as much as you can. Bring your navel to your spine. Deep breath in. Holding at the top. And release. 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 Empty all the way out. Holding empty at the bottom. Noticing that emptiness. Deep breath in. All the way in. Filling those lungs all the way to the top. Holding. And relax. Relax, relax. And as you do so, start to bring some movement back into the body, moving your head around, stretching your neck, releasing your shoulders. And here we are. Let's talk about some rage. Let's talk about some rage. What brought us to
Yeah.
this topic, Will?
Well, I had that Vipassana experience where I just did all that meditation in May, so late May into Labor Day weekend. I did those 10 days and 10 hours a day of meditation, and sitting in stillness for each hour. Each meditation is 1 hour, and a lot of shit came up for me, and I really started to. And then what's nice about this practice is you're 10 days in silence, so there's no communication, no writing, no reading, no nothing, like no commiserating with the outside world, no commiserating with other people around you, only commiserating with yourself. And also they use the physical they use the body in this practice because when you sit in pain for like an hour, because my shoulder be fucking screaming at me, or my hips or something like that, and I can't change it, I can't move, like all this emotion would wake up. And I just started feeling all this rage that would come up. Because I just wanted to scream out in in the middle of this like very quiet meditation practice, in the middle of the meditation hall, in the middle of this meditation practice, so many times. And then I would just calm down and then come back to the technique and just keep working and working. So I had all these like kind of this insight around rage. And how rage was really trying to control me, and where it came from. And then when I got back from all this Vipassana stuff I did, I started, all these downloads started coming. So I started journaling and making more, creating more information about rage and my relationship to rage. And I thought it'd be great to bring it to the audience today, because it's, like we said in the very beginning, it's in every single every person.
Right.
And I thought it'd be great and if we have awareness about it, then we can change it. So that's kind of why rage kind of came up for us in our
I love
audience
it.
today. So
And
yeah,
in your speaking about your Vipassana retreat, and I know we've discussed this in the past, and this image, I don't know if you can see that. It might be a little washed out, but basically it's someone sitting in meditation,
yeah,
and
bring it closer so you can see the
inside of
skull.
them, let me see if I can
There
make
you
that a
go.
little bit. There you go. Inside of them is the rage. You can see the rage inside of them and that turmoil, but the individual is sitting in peace, kind of controlling that rage. And we're going to talk a little bit about controlling the rage and how that can be good for you, and also how it can be bad for you. And we're actually going to get into a lot of that now. So, where do you want to go from here?
Well, I figure, here we'll set a baseline. There's a lot of great information about rage on Wikipedia, a lot of different references to, different research and stuff that they're understood about rage for a long, long time, and therapies and stuff like that of how to get over rage. So we're going to kind of go down this little, defining rage and going down kind of the rabbit hole of rage, and then we can talk about, how it affects our lives, what we're doing. And this is a great time for the audience as we go through to throw some comments in the chat, please. So we can do this together. So let's start with and John. Yeah, so let's start with this. So we'll do just an overall definition of rage. Is that cool? I'm just
Yeah.
gonna keep flowing, John. Let me know
Yeah.
what's
Go
up.
for it,
So
man.
rage definition is violent and uncontrolled anger. Okay, that's just the regular straight definition of rage: violent, uncontrolled anger. Wikipedia goes a little bit deeper. I kind of enjoy the etymology of rage, which is from the 1300th century, meaning madness, insanity, fit of frenzy, rashness, foolhardiness, intense or violent emotion, anger, wrath, fierceness, fierceness in battle, violence. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And in French, there's rage, is how they talk about rage, meaning spirit, passion, rage, fury, madness. And so that kind of the whole madness things comes up quite a bit, and insanity and then frenzy and fury are all things that I think a lot of us have experienced out there when being rageful. I mean, I think we'll talk about anger and rage, but like if you're angry enough, boom, it can really turn into rage, and then you just become kind of blinded by it. But anything there, John?
Yeah. I mean, what I think you covered some great stuff there, but one piece I noticed you missed is that old French rage,
Mm,
rage, if you will, that comes even
yeah.
further back from the medieval Latin
Oh,
rabia, meaning
yeah.
rabies, which means
Ooh.
madness, um, like
Mm,
like truly losing your mind or being rabid.
wow.
And I thought
Yeah.
that was an interesting aspect to the piece on
Right.
Wikipedia. And
And think about an animal like a rabid dog, right? Or a
yeah,
rabid animal. Like they attack, right?
yeah,
They literally
exactly.
have no, we're going to go into it. They have no concern for their own safety. They feel no pain.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting just in the early definition of how we describe rage, how it begins to show up, how it's a real deep thing in all of us and really access. We kind of live deeply through that reptilian brain. Um, so you want me? I'll read the first part of the symptoms
yeah.
and effects, and then we'll keep
I
going.
can jump into
All
that,
right.
and then we'll have
Yeah,
a
go for it, man.
chat about it.
Yeah,
So again,
sure.
this is kind of pulled from the Wikipedia website, symptoms and effects. Rage can sometimes lead to a state of mind where individuals experiencing it believe they can do and often are capable of doing things that may normally seem physically impossible. Those experiencing rage usually feel the effects of high adrenaline levels in the body. This increase in adrenal output raises the physical strength and endurance levels of the person and sharpens their senses while dulling the sensation of pain. So here we can see some sides where we
Yeah.
may actually want
Hmm.
rage, right? High
Yeah.
levels of adrenaline impair memory. Temporal perspective is also affected. So people in rage have described experiencing events in slow motion. I'm sure we've all experienced that. I know I've been in a car crash one time where it literally felt like it took like about a minute for us to get from when we were crashing to the end of the crash, and it probably took all of 5 seconds. It's
Wow. Yeah.
pretty crazy how that can happen, and that may not have been rage where I was angry, but it was just a rage of the adrenaline and everything else in my body. But yeah,
It's almost like a protection mechanism in some ways,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it says, time dilation occurs due to the individual becoming hyper aware of the hind brain. So let's talk about that piece. Let's talk about those symptoms and effects. The side of
Hmm.
the adrenal impairment of our memory,
Hmm.
the ability to do things that we may not have been able to do in regular everyday life because now we have this new energy. We've also shut off our fear. We've shut off our pain. So yeah,
Right.
let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it says here, so time dilation occurs due to the individual becoming hyper aware of the hind brain, which is the seat of the fight or flight. So it's what's coming up for me right now is how interesting. Like we had flow state, we had Kotler on, and also time slows down in flow. I know, like, not saying rage and flow are the same in any way, but it's interesting, like how our concept of time in these heightened states, whether it's rage or whether it's flow, changes, which I think is really interesting. And look at what it does. I mean, these are all hormones, right, that begin, biochemistry that begin to change our brain so our brain can focus on or becomes hyper aware of what is going on or what is like, rage, so we can get on the defensive, attack, like, be a bigger human being than we normally are, if you will. Like we just like grow into this strength and this aggression, and everything starts working in order to really hyper focus on what's right in front of us, and managing whatever that situation is through rage. So it's really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got in our autonomic nervous system, we've got the
Mm,
parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous
mm,
system is kind of run by the amygdala, and that's the fight, flight, or freeze side of our nervous system. And when we
mm,
get into that fight, flight, or freeze, everything else shuts down. Like our stomach, it doesn't digest. There's
mm,
no effort to actually push waste out of our body at that time because we are focused on living, like protecting
mm,
ourselves. And a lot of this rage comes from, as you mentioned, basically the threat, the outside threat. We're basically
mm,
trying to defend ourselves from that outside threat. All these different hormones are controlling that. But like
mm,
how does this come up for us or for you, Will, in
mm.
a meditation? And I'd like to go back to that
Well,
Vipassana
that
retreat.
no, thank you, because that came up for me as well. You just spoke of sympathetic, parasympathetic, and so as we're in this deep, deep, deep meditation, we're accessing, and this was really beautiful about the Vipassana technique and how it's designed and what it does, and how it creates awareness, really, um, by just being calming the mind, which will calm the body. You're in the parasympathetic nervous system, but we're in our body sitting for 1 hour, and therefore so it really came up for me about the inability to control was a really big thing. So I was told, I was sitting with it's called Aditana, sitting with strong determination not to move. So I'm literally like, there's this battle on the inside. Like my body, like say my right shoulder or my thigh at one time, like fell asleep for a long time. Like it was, but I'm not supposed to fix it. I'm not supposed to mess with it. But normally I would. Like normally in my outside, the pattern of my behavior outside of this practice would be to change it, like to seek comfort in some ways. But that inability to seek comfort put a control on me, and I
Mm.
wasn't in control anymore. So to wake up this rage, and the rage wanted me to, so it would build into a rage really. And then I just start my mind, like that's when I wanted to scream. There was some dude, that really was ticking me off, like, cause he had a ticking
The
clock
ticking clock. I know we talked
behind me.
about it.
The ticking, yeah, we talked about that. Oh my God, like I all the imaginations because of my rage that I wanted to do to this guy that was really pissing me off. So, but at the same time, it's like this contrast. So what's beautiful about calming down in the mind and the body and meditation, right? And then sitting with the discipline of not moving, and then experiencing that rage and that lack of control, it brought this conversation to the surface. It brings the rage to the surface so I can objectively observe it. And also the technique, you're changing, everything's changing all the time. So just like clouds of a storm, right? They will eventually pass. This too shall pass, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. A rage would eventually pass, and then I would find peace. But also the way the practice is beautiful, it's like when I don't feed that habit of rage and the need to control, which leads to the rage, that's when I begin to change. That's when I'm not a slave to the rage anymore, which is a big epiphany I had. Don't be slave to the rage. And then
Right.
how do you do that? That's when I breathe. That's when I, like in my regular life, that's when I breathe. I get up and move if I need to, walk away, and don't don't drop yourself into the rageful stew that's waiting. And boom, and it's lights on, and you just get like wildfire on the inside. And you just,
Right. It
and
explodes
then
just
the
like
whole world, you just,
the
yeah,
scene behind us here for those who
yeah,
are not
yeah,
watching. If you're listening later in the podcast, I have a giant fire exploding behind myself and Will on the
yeah.
screen. And actually, I got to come back to some of the comments here in the chat, actually,
Oh,
from
I didn't see them. Yeah.
one of my high school buddies there, Jonathan Morris. He and I went to high school, graduated high school, ran track and cross country together. He says, for me, rage starts way beforehand. It's rarely a problem for me, but when it happens, it explodes, and the casualties are not usually the source of the original anger. So
There you
coming
go.
back to, your Vipassana and the guy with the ticking clock behind you, that may have angered you, but there may have been so much more to that rage, right? That may have driven that
Yeah.
rage. And I want to talk
Yeah.
about the triggers of rage for people. And I would say even more specifically, the triggers of rage for men. And
Yeah.
maybe this is everyone, but I know you mentioned one right there: loss of control. Right, the fact
Yeah.
that you had
Yeah.
your leg was falling asleep, you were hurting in your
Oh,
shoulders,
yeah.
and you could not control that. I mean, I guess theoretically you could have stopped and said, you know what, I'm done, but you wanted to push yourself past the limit, and you had lost control. I know loss of control for me, like, okay, I'm Commander McCaskill, right? Retired
Mm,
Commander McCaskill, and I bring that Commander McCaskill mentality sometimes into my household with my kids.
mm.
So I've got three
Yeah.
young kids: a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And when Commander
Mm.
McCaskill is in the house, and I try to make things run the way that I want them to run, and I try to control them, I get upset. But then I take the commander hat off, if you will, and John McCaskill, dad, comes, fully alive in the moment, and
Mm,
that I'm able to suppress that rage, because I realize, one, like Jonathan Morse says here, the casualty of the rage will be like me barking at
mm.
my kids, which I don't
Yeah.
want to do.
Yeah.
And I fully admit, as a parent, I have done that. I've lost control and barked at my kids. But when I take a step back and I'm like, okay, well, let's practice some mindfulness here. The loss of control in this particular instance is not something to get upset about. But I think
Right.
loss of control is one of the biggest triggers for people, and I think quite
Yeah.
often Type A personalities. When I said men, but probably more so for Type A personalities, whether that's men, women, whatever the case may be. But let's talk about some other triggers, man. And then we can come back to the Wikipedia side.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back. So just just a little bookmark. So we're going to go to so we'll go to rational thoughts and reasoning. We'll come back to the Wikipedia, but
Yeah.
I think let's go. So triggers. I think it's interesting, John. First, how it's contagious. So instead of the rage that comes from the trigger, and then all of a sudden you're yelling at somebody that just happens to be in an earshot. So
Yeah.
anybody that's around. So I feel like there's like a micro side. So this inside of us, the rage starts to fill, but then there's this macro side of rage, and it just starts to it's contagious, just like a virus or some sort of organism, and it just starts to tear everything down. And I can if someone is rageful around me, I can light up like a tuning fork and match his rage as well, which is very interesting. So
Contagious.
rage is it's contagious, and it's like its own trigger in some ways, which I think is very interesting. But in a wiki, and I said this earlier, rage tends to be expressed when a person faces a threat to their pride. Think about that, right? Their position, their ability to deceive, which I thought that would deceive others, self-deceptive beliefs, or socioeconomic status. So these are all different things that they've discovered, understanding the psychology of rage. Jealousy is another one. Fear. This is like that ego hurt, like that's that position in society and that sort of thing, and pride for sure. Embarrassment might bring up rage for somebody. What else, John, for you?
I mean, definitely, jealousy is a big one, and I think social media. And it's this ironic thing that we're broadcasting this on social media, but you go through social media for any amount of time, and there's comments, and you can see how people get so angry at one another just in the comments, and I think a lot of that is driven by rage, or sorry, by jealousy and ego and pride, but also hurt. I think hurt drives a lot of that rage on social media, but hurt also drives a lot of rage elsewhere. You want to get on that defensive posture. Someone comes to you and they say something to you about something that you've done or something that they see in you, and you take that as a personal attack. And rather than taking that and being like, okay, this person is trying to give me some ideally constructive criticism, but maybe it's not, but they're trying to give me some information, and I can take that and process it, not take it personally, but process it and maybe become better from it. Instead, I turn around and I attack them back, right? That's the natural response.
Yeah.
And that's the rage, right? That's the rage. So I think hurt, jealousy, ego, pride, this is a whole bunch of words for the same thing, but those are huge triggers for rage. And so, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that?
Well, there's some really great stuff. I'm going to read the next couple pieces of Wikipedia, and it really talks exactly to this, which I think is great, right? Rational thought and reasoning would inhibit an individual from acting rapidly upon impulse. An older explanation of this time dilation effect is that instead of actually slowing our perception of time, high levels of adrenaline increase our ability to recall specific minutia of an event after it occurs. Since humans gauge time based on the numbers of things they remember, high adrenaline events such as those experienced during periods of rage seem to unfold more slowly. Then next, we go deeper into the minds. That's more of the time dilation. Keep going. A person in a state of rage may also lose much of their capacity for rational thought and reasoning, and may act unusually violently on their impulses to the point that they may attack until they themselves have been incapacitated or the source of their rage has been destroyed or otherwise removed. I mean, that's like blind rage, right? Think about that. Blind rage. Like you're just like, boom, like you just completely check out. We're going to get into the biochemistry. We already kind of talked a little bit about the biochemistry, but there's a lot of stuff going on here within our bodies that you ever hear, I think we might say it a little bit later, when people see red.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's part of the experience of rage. Think of raging bull, right?
Right.
The bull runs towards like where they're triggered by red flags and stuff like that, which is so it's in other mammals as well.
Yeah. So and talking about seeing red or redness in general and how it's tied to rage. before we did the show, we were talking about that Disney or Pixar movie Inside Out, with it has all the different emotions living inside of you. And the one is anger. Granted, it's not rage, but anger, very similar. And he is red. And when he gets fired up, his head lights up on fire. And that's how it feels, right? It feels like literally I get warmer if I'm in a rage. I get hot. I can feel
Yeah, the
tingling in my
adrenaline.
head. The adrenaline is like pumping. My heart starts racing, and it's like you lose control. It's like the honey badger or a raccoon.
Oh shit!
Right? Like
Yeah.
something that is cornered and has no other options.
Oh
What
shit!
are you
Yeah.
going to do? You're going to fight, and that's what a lot of the time we feel in our rage, is that we have no other options. But sometimes there are other options if we stop for a second and take a breath. I know we talk about the STIA process, right? The how that is a part of processing something in a much more effective way. So STIA is the stimulus, that outside stimulus, what that stimulus, the thought that drives, what emotion that thought drives, and then the action driven by that emotion. And if we take a second in between the stimulus and the thought, just to take a breath and really analyze that stimulus, we can change our thought, which changes our emotion, which changes our action. And again, a lot of the time when we feel like we're cornered, we may not be, if we just take a breath and really take a look at what the situation is. Again, coming full circle, my kids, right? If my kids are like flying off the handle and getting upset, and one kid wants, candy, while another kid wants me to find their balloon, while another kid is crying, blah, 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 and I get frustrated, and those are the stimulus, and I'm like, I get frustrated. So now my thought is, fuck, I can't control this. Now my emotion is, oh, and then my action is to yell. Well, what does that do, right? Instead, if the stimulus is all those kids doing their own thing, and I take a breath, my thought is normally completely different. There's a lot going on here with rage and how we can change our actions based on it.
Well, this is why emotional regulation is so important, and practicing emotional regulation, meaning practicing your breathing, practicing meditation, and become objectively aware of your emotional self. Right? It's the only way that you can prevent rage from being that virus within and without. And also what we're seeing here, the connection of like anger, growing anger builds into rage. So if you're really angry and if it just grows and grows, it's like it's funny. Here's fire, John. Right? We have fire, right? And you can feel that turning red, the fury, right? But what stokes the fire? Anger stokes that fire, and eventually it becomes this conflagration of rage. Like everything just turns ablaze, like it's like a wildfire. But right, if you begin with this understanding the STIA process, but then the understanding is great, but then we need to practice, right? That's why we do our opening grounding meditation practice, but just the breathing, just simply being aware of your breath helps us to create more of that emotional awareness, the emotional literacy, and then the effectively begin to manage our emotions. And so we're not stoking that fire. We're not giving it any more. Like we need three things to make something ablaze, right? You need oxygen, a combustible material, and there's something
heat, right?
and heat, and heat, right? And a spark, right? So if
Yeah.
we're not giving it any one of those three, so we might have a spark, right? That's the first trigger, right? The stimulus, right?
Yep.
But if we keep getting spark, it'll start to grow. If we take out, right, the oxygen, which could be thought of as more anger, then we don't get into this blaze. This wildfire of rage,
right?
And then then it's like scorched earth. Then it's scorched earth. It takes everything away. Boom! It's just everything's decimated around you. Everything,
right?
And then all of a sudden you're backpedaling and apologizing. It's like, oh fuck, why did I do that?
Yeah, you say things in a rage that you totally don't mean, right? You can and really hurtful things that you can't take back. Or you can do some things physically that you can't take back. So let's talk about the rage and suppressing that rage and letting it go also, and let's talk about the health implications of that. So I know on the wiki site we've brought up, we actually discussed this before the show. It almost sounds as though they're speaking out of both sides of their mouths. It says some research suggests that an individual is more susceptible to having feelings of depression and anxiety if he or she experiences rage on a frequent basis. Then the flip side of that, it says health complications become much worse if an individual represses feelings of rage. Then John E. Sarno, who honestly I'm not sure who that is, I should look that up, but John E. Sarno,
it's on Wiki. It's all on
the
Wiki.
Wikipedia page. John E. Sarno believes that repressed rage in the subconscious leads to physical ailments. But at the same time, cardiac stress and hypertension are other health complications that will occur when rage is experienced on a regular basis. So it sounds as though, rage in and of itself, if you don't control it, can hurt you. But if you suppress it, that can also hurt you. So what do we do? What's the winning formula here, Will? What do you think?
I mean, I think that's why we need to work out. We need to go running. We need to, maybe box. We need to like make contact with other people. Maybe dancing. Like we need to we need to move our body. So instead of, again, think of the word stewing in your shit. Instead of stewing, like literally you're sitting and marinating, and you're feeding that fire of anger and going to turn it into the wildfire of rage. And if you get out and begin to maybe leave the room if you're being triggered in that moment, instead of engaging, and then becoming rageful, finding our breath as you walk out. So, I mean, boxing, I think would be great. Or like, I imagine, I don't do jujitsu, but I'm sure that would be a great way to kind of work out some of that rage and stuff like that. But I mean, what about you, John? And I'd love to hear how they use it in the military,
Oh yeah, perfect. I'll go there here in a second. But I want to talk about, so what you mentioned there, it's rather than suppressing it. So you're not suppressing it, you're redirecting it, right? So you're redirecting your rage into something that is productive, something that is healthy, something that is going to help you out. And I can't help but come back to my son. So my son is 3 years old and I love him to death, but he's a little boy and he wants to just wreck some shit. And when I say, and when I say that, when he loses control or when he doesn't get his way, he has his own little rage, right? He has little 3-year-old rage, and he goes to a school, and at the end of the day, if he's done anything to maybe physically hurt another child, we'll get a little slip saying like he pushed another child, or he shoved another child, or he yelled at another child, or something. And what the teachers say is they're redirecting him. And so I talked to him afterwards. I'm like, hey, buddy, what are you doing to address your frustration? And this is to a 3-year-old. And he's like, I push on the wall now. And so he goes, rather than pushing another kid, rather than, throwing something at another kid, he goes to the wall and he pushes against the wall. And so he's redirected that rage into something that, granted, pushing the wall isn't necessarily productive, but at least it makes him feel better, right? So redirecting rather than suppressing. You can't tell a kid, don't get angry. Well, you can't tell an adult, don't get angry, but you can redirect that anger. You can redirect that rage. But as far as in the military, as a matter of fact, someone says, I think somewhere in the comments here, it said, you can weaponize rage. You can weaponize rage.
Completely. It often is. Very often is.
Well, I would say that in the military and in I would say in the public in general, the media has weaponized rage. I mean, saying, I won't go one way or the other, but I will say just in general, media has put a lot of fear mongering out there and pitted one group against another, whether that's politically, whether it's religiously. They pitted these groups against another. And now there's this like chronic rage. You open up a newspaper, what even is that? If you open up a website rather, and you go and you look up the news, most of the news is some type of fear mongering or pitting one group against another, because rage, that sells, right?
It does.
I think it has been weaponized outside of the military even. So I like that comment because it's interesting. But coming back to your question, Will, sorry, I've gone all over the place, but coming back to your question as far as what we do in the military, a lot of that is exactly with what you mentioned. Hey, going and finding some type of physical outlet. If that's running, if it's hitting the gym, doing a CrossFit workout, doing something physically.
Exercising it.
Yeah, doing something
Yeah.
physically is normally what
Mhm.
helps me process that rage, and it helped me when I was in the military. And it honestly, it helped um, to clear some things up when we had some issues within a platoon. We would go do a really hard run together, or a really hard ruck run. That's running around with a big pack on your back, and wear ourselves out physically. And at the end of that, most issues that we have between individuals were resolved.
Wow. There you go.
So doing
That's
something
beautiful.
physically, yeah. Now, I will also tell you, I will admit here that there were times where we went back to what's called a mill van, which is basically a metal container, a big metal container, a shipping container. And we opened up that mill van, and we had guys put on their gloves, and we let them box it out. We let them box it
There you
out. Like,
go.
hey, oh, you guys have
Yep.
issues, you can't resolve them, box it out. And they boxed the shit out of each other. But at the end, they were hugging. And I got video of that.
Yeah.
Will, I have to show it to you sometime. But I
Yeah.
can't show
No,
it
I'd
to you.
love
I
to see
can't show
it.
it to you here today, because I may
No,
be brought up on charges later. But
no, no, not at
100%.
all. I mean,
Yeah.
but it really shows how important it is to, I mean, just it's like to move it through. If we stew in it, like, I was reading stuff like, in research for this, it's like, this is when we begin to take it, and instead of being responsible for it, we begin to bring it into the world in some of the most disgusting ways, which could be,
Yeah.
killing somebody, shooting somebody. I mean, think about how many times uh, they talk about rage in the courtroom. People
Right.
like, rage of passion,
Primal
like,
rage. Yeah.
murders, like, yeah, primal rage, like shootings, like mass shootings. It's like, this is where rage can be a big vehicle for a lot of this. And I think, and very often is. And, and if it's not dealt with, I mean, and maybe it's just a matter of talking about it too, John, like getting a
Yeah.
therapist and
Oh, yeah.
talking about your rage within, big time. It's very helpful to kind of pull it outside, objectify it, talk about everything. A lot of things we're talking about, what's triggering it, what's your relationship to it, like, how has it expressed itself? And just, again, like I said in the beginning, it's like, that destination of awareness is the birthplace of change. And if you have a lot of rage, if you're very angry, I mean, what if you just sit with it? What if you just get to know it? How is that going to change you as a person, as a leader, in your family, for yourself, like in your community, at work? So, and it's what's interesting is coming back to the manipulative aspects that rage can be used for, whether it's by a leader or media, right? Because it's so deep ingrained into our reptilian brain, and it's right there, that if we don't rise in emotional intelligence, then we're going to be a slave to the rage, and
Right.
very easily slave to the rage. You can fall right into it. And it's like, and also what I think is very interesting about uh, rage, it's like a virus. It's a contagion. It just, boom, it can, like, it's like the tuning fork, and you can attune to rage. That's how deep it
Right.
is in our DNA. And you can just be spinning off with, you don't even know why. It's a fascinating part of our humanity, for sure.
Oh, for
And
sure.
but I think what the point is here is to exercise it, like, to,
Right.
if you get to know what triggers it, and then move it through with exercise. Um, Anything else on that, John? Should we go to the
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
aspects?
We'll go there in a second. One piece I wanted to hit on is,
Yeah, please.
we
Yeah.
mentioned that rage is a natural emotion, and it happens in all of us. And
Mm.
I want to also be clear that, the emotions that arise with rage, and specifically the emotions afterwards, um, what they feel like, right? The guilt,
Oh
the
yeah,
shame,
the
like
come
the
down,
self
right?
shame.
The
Yeah,
the
the
hangover, right? Sorry, the
yeah,
hangover rage.
exactly, like, right. Hey, I mean, you realize that the rage probably led you to say some things, do some things that were wrong. Um, but the shame, the self shaming, and the guilt that we experience, the beating up of ourselves that we experience, I don't think that is healthy either. Now, feeling some level of remorse, that's definitely healthy, but like guilting ourselves into this pit, this kind of hole is not. I
Mm,
think maybe going and talking to who it is that was the object of your explosion,
mm,
not necessarily the object of your rage, because sometimes you peel it back and the object of your rage is actually something else, somewhere else, somebody
mm,
else. But whoever received that explosion, go and talk to them, and clarify why it is you felt what you felt, why it is you did what you did, why it is you said what you said. Granted, they may not
mm.
forgive you, but self-shaming and the guilt that you feel afterwards is, I don't think, healthy either. So I want to make sure we talk
Yeah.
about that piece.
No, no. I've done some of that work with momentum education. Another shout out to momentum education. It really helped me back in 2010 or 11. I really started doing this work, and it's all like landmark forum work. And as we went through this program, they had like they have a beginners program, or basic program, advanced into leadership, and the leadership program was like 3 months long, like 90 days. And we'd go through this together. We'd buddy with somebody and have an accountability partner. And the whole group was working together to help everyone accomplish their goals in like 5 different areas of their life, whether it's, financial, career, community, physical. And it was really beautiful. But as working as a group, being an organism as a group, and understanding what it takes to work together effectively, we would have clearing sessions where
Mm,
if somebody you felt wronged you in some ways and you didn't have a chance to address it in that moment, um, we had this like time and say, hey, we're going to clear. And you would just go right up to the person, and you had like kind of a little bit of way of speaking to it, so it's very clear. Communication is very clear when you're working on this very basic level of vulnerability almost. And like, look, you made me feel like this,
mm,
and I just wanted to let you know that this is how I felt. And I just needed to clear this out of me. You're like either clearing the energy instead of letting it turn into the stew of anger, and then boom, lighting into the wildfire of rage.
yeah. I
So
mean,
it
it's
was
like a
very healthy. Yeah, very healthy.
well, yeah.
And let me just say one more thing, but
Yeah,
it's
please.
also very important to practice that, because then you get to know how powerful it is. Instead of it being an idea, it becomes an actual practice. But sorry, John, I just wanted to finish that thought.
No, no, absolutely. I interrupted you, so thanks for finishing the thought. But
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of the image that I had there is a pressure cooker or a pot sitting on
There
a
you go.
stove, and
Yeah.
you've got it turned on, and it's got some water in it, and you've got a top on it, and by clearing, by going and talking with someone, you're taking the top off that pot, and you're letting the steam out, and you're taking some of the pressure off so that it doesn't boil
Mm-hmm.
over. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
literally, the image, it happens all the time in our house. It's like the pot boils over and it goes onto the stove, and that's what we are doing in our minds, in our bodies, in our nervous systems, and we have to have some type of outlet. And if it's
Yep.
not clearing, like you mentioned, then it's going
Right.
and punching a hole in a wall, or it's flipping out
Right.
on somebody, and that's not
Yeah.
gonna be productive. It's not gonna help anyone. But if you
Yeah.
go and clear it, yes, it may be difficult. And I would even say, I think this is where fear comes into play again, is there's a
Mm.
fear of going and addressing this with someone, going and addressing an
Right.
issue, a challenge that you have with someone. But in the long run, getting that out on the table and
Mm-hmm.
talking through it is going to be better for everyone. It's going to be better for everyone, because then there's no
Well, how
extension.
exactly, and how much does pride get in the way of that? And
Oh,
how much is
huge.
also a pride a trigger here they talked about,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, and this is like some of the masculine aspects of this, and we all have a sense of pride, regardless of a gender. But I know the men around me, the men I grew up with, myself in general as a man, it's like pride, and you start messing with my pride, or also pride getting in the way of me apologizing, like, hey,
Mm,
sorry, like, or even before, just by maybe by apologizing for the first transgression or the second transgression. And if you get to the third or the fourth, then it could be that wildfire of rage that just destroys everything.
Yeah.
But then you're just taking those moments and being aware and practicing and understanding the power of apology, just saying sorry, and how, it kind of, I guess maybe an apology and a sorry is like, it's the extinguisher of this
Mhm.
potential wildfire of rage. And again, instead of attuning together to more rage and then creating like a fucking, oh my God, like a very powerful force that can really destroy even more of the world around you, when there's 2 or maybe 4 and then 8 and then 16 people starting to get rage, right?
Right.
Saying sorry, listening, right, and just holding space and speaking in an authentic and vulnerable way, really changes the vibe, right? So our vibration is one of peace and harmony, or at least trying to get along, or to understand one another, and it's a whole nother way of and when I feel that, when I say that, like, that's when I feel water and blue and green and peace, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It's a whole different, even speaking to it, I change my mind.
Right.
Whereas I speak of rage and anger and all this stuff, it's like boom, like I can,
Right.
it starts to almost light me up in a different way. Just
I know.
talking about it right here
I
with you,
know.
John, is fascinating.
Before the show, we were talking about rage, right? And I could sense that rage welling up in us, just discussing rage, how that caused a little bit of rage.
Powerful.
But I also,
Yeah.
you said saying I'm sorry and the power of the apology. It made me think of when we were in Costa Rica, and we sat and we faced, somebody else in the retreat, which we're actually going to be talking later with Neil Markey from Beckley Retreats, and talking about the psilocybin and psychedelic retreats. But this particular piece of the retreat didn't have any psychedelics in it. It was just an emotional side. And this is also addressing the question here in the comments. What does that mean when you say you need to practice it too? How do we put that way of clearing into routine or daily practice? So
Yeah.
I'm going to come to that here in a
Yeah.
second.
I have a comment on that as well, but yeah,
Please.
for sure.
So when we were in Costa Rica, we faced someone else in the retreat, and we imagined them as somebody that we had wronged in our lives. And we said, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I think that was the 4 things, right? Did I
Oh
miss one
yeah,
there,
yeah,
Will?
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it
Oh
was,
yeah.
I'm
Say that
sorry.
again. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it's, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I love you.
That was
And
it. That was it.
saying
Yeah, that
that
was it.
to, I mean, a relative stranger. We had been at the retreat for 3 or 4 days at this point,
Right.
but relative stranger, and then imagining that person as someone that I had wronged, and saying that I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. And we said it multiple times, multiple times.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember like tears streaming down my face, but I also felt as though this huge weight that I'd been carrying around
Oh.
of guilt had been dropped. I could drop that. Even though I wasn't
Yeah.
saying it to the person that I had actually wronged, in my mind, it was the same thing. So coming to your question here, about, hey, how do you put this into daily practice?
Oh
I think
yeah.
I think a lot of the rage and the guilt that we carry around is for people that we have wronged. So maybe calling them, contacting them, and letting them know that, hey, we realize that we wronged them. We're sorry for that. But the other side is, a lot of the guilt is what we've done wrong to ourselves. And we can, and I know this is going to sound super woo woo, but I actually absolutely believe in this, is staring yourself in the mirror and
There
saying,
you go.
I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you, to yourself.
Boom. Wow, that's
And I think
powerful.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's a huge piece in really uh,
Mm.
addressing that rage, addressing that guilt. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, that's on
Ooh,
that. I think that, yeah, no, I have something too, but that's like more of that micro side of rage, like the
yeah.
inside of rage, instead of like, so dealing with your rageful self. Another great way, I love what Roman says here: honor cleanses shame, which I
Yeah.
think that was really cool. Right. A great way to practice this clearing is with the people that are closest with you, 100%. So, this is your spouse, your siblings, your mom and dad, because there's an environment in your closest relationships that, for all that love and all that kind of DNA familial, love amongst us, amongst family and very close friends, and you just have such a deep relationship, you're going to have a better opportunity in my experience, and sometimes it doesn't always go the way you want, but to actually sit and speak with somebody and be like, look, and come from a place of not trying to, just sharing your feelings about how you're feeling about
Mm.
something that happened between you guys. And yeah, there is actually a formula, uh, like a cleansing form, like how to speak to it, so recognize your feelings, speak to those feelings, um, and not trying to put anybody on defensive here either, like the person that you're interacting with, not trying to be like, oh, you did this and you did that, just creating a space for you to talk about, this, how you're feeling and this transgression that you felt. And it could be a completely, the other person that's receiving this information, this could be something that, was misinterpreted in some way. So at least you're having that conversation about that misinterpretation. So it's a great way just to, because I remember, here's an example. I had a roommate a while ago, and something went down between us around, like, I don't know, something with Amazon or something like that. It was something kind of small, but we let it affect our relationship for like 6 or 9 months, and it
Wow.
really, like, there was a sense of rage, like, in the apartment, that it was very difficult to live with.
Probably
And
palpable.
it was very palpable. It was very, very palpable, and it grew in greater palpability over time.
Mm.
So it
Yeah.
was amazing because it was not addressed. And then it got to a point where I had to say, I just, like, I can't believe, I don't know if it was, again, pride was kind of holding me back in some ways. And I finally brought it up. I'm like, yo, like, we need to talk about this thing, because it's like an elephant in the room, and it's really messing up the vibe of the house, the vibe of the apartment.
Yeah.
So, and we did, and we are great friends to this day. Whereas if we went the other way and didn't have this conversation, I might still be pissed off and bad mouthing this person in my mind,
Right.
and not having a relationship with them.
100%, man.
So,
100%.
yeah, yeah,
This also brings up, something that we were teaching earlier this week is the loving kindness meditations.
there you
And
go.
what, for those of you who are not familiar, loving kindness meditation is basically a compassion meditation. And a lot of the time, those loving kindness meditations involve you visualizing someone and you wishing them well, wishing them, joy and fulfillment, um, like having all pain and suffering removed from them. And you initially, normally, start with someone that you care for deeply or may even love, and you picture that person, you're giving them joy, wishing that they have no pain or suffering. And then the next person you kind of envision is someone that you have neutral feelings for. So someone you may know, like the grocery store clerk, but you have zero feelings for. You just know them in passing. Kind of wish
Mm.
them the same. Hey, joy, fulfillment, lack of suffering, removal of pain. Then you picture someone that you have some type of challenge with, like maybe ill feelings even. You may have those
Mm.
feelings for them. Same thing, joy, fulfillment, removal of pain, removal of suffering. And then the last thing, or normally, or sometimes rather, sometimes it's not normally, you actually picture yourself as another person and wishing yourself joy, fulfillment, removal of suffering, removal of pain. And that can really change how you visualize other people and how you visualize yourself, and increase your level of compassion for them. And in
Mm.
increasing your level of compassion, I think you can decrease your level of rage. So,
Oh,
coming
completely,
back
completely.
2 weeks ago, Stephen Kotler was on the show, and he said that he had been
Mm.
practicing loving kindness meditation regularly, and that those were the meditations that he got the most out of. Mostly, he was talking about creativity, but I think in decreasing your rage, you're able to tap into so many of the other emotions that are available to us as human beings. And that can come through the loving kindness meditation. So if you haven't ever
No, and
tried a
that's,
loving kindness meditation, I highly, highly
mm.
suggest giving it a try.
At the end of the Vipassana meditation, by the 8th day, we learned it's called metta,
Metta.
metta. Metta equals loving kindness, in Pali, or I think that's the language where metta comes from. And we would practice at the end of every meditation. So we go through, basically you learn 3 meditation practices: anapanasati, sitting for 3 days, 30 hours, just following your breath and sharpening your mind through a process known as like samadhi, mental mastery. 4th day, you're developing wisdom, panya, right? Wisdom, from the scanning of the body, sitting still in I'm losing my words for a second, in discipline, and then just scanning your body, and then the wisdom comes from uh, not reacting to your rage, seeing it, being aware of it, and then allowing it to change on its own, and you just come back to the middle, right? Which is that equanimity. Equanimity is super important. Practicing equanimity is it's a big practice of patience, which you mentioned, Jon, earlier,
Yeah.
or you didn't mention earlier when you were saying about what meditation also does. It helps you to become more patient with yourself, and
Right.
therefore be more patient, have an opportunity to be more patient with others. Instead of accessing that rage and trying to control the situations, you kind of get more into the flow, right? By working with exercise equanimity. And then that metta also helps you to change perception of yourself, change perception of the world, and actually begin to put on those rose-colored glasses instead of the red-colored glasses, I guess, where everything has a sense of loving kindness with it, within and without, and everything is connected through loving kindness. So
Right.
really powerful. I mean, and again, it's another perspective changer, but it takes practice. You
It
have to
does.
practice. You can't just listen to this information, everybody out there, and expect, you gain insight and you'll get some awareness around this topic. But what you have to do in order, if you really want to change, if you're a person that's easily triggered to anger and then rage and destroying all sorts of things around you because of that rage, take some meditation, take some practice, just get to know your breath. Things will start to change over time, but you have to practice in order for things to change. But be aware first, and that's what this kind of episode's all about.
Yeah.
Jon,
There you go.
we're at the hour
Yeah.
right now. What if we go into maybe just types of therapy that people can seek out there through the wiki?
Yeah. We'll quickly go through that.
And then closing comments. I don't mind if we run a little longer. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that,
I'm good. I'm good to run a
because I
little bit
think we have a
longer.
really great conversation
Yeah.
today. And then, all right, let's just go. I'll go in through, because it looks like we hit most of the points we wanted to today in the notes.
Yeah.
But let's go. Treatment and types of therapy. Evidence has shown that behavioral and cognitive therapy techniques have assisted individuals that have difficulties controlling their anger or rage. Okay, again, that's behavioral and cognitive therapy techniques, and this is how it's done. How do these techniques work? These types of therapies, role playing and personal studies are the 2 main techniques used to aid individuals with managing rage. Role playing is utilized by angering an individual to the point of rage and then showing them how to control it. Okay, so that's what behavioral and cognitive therapy techniques can do for you, and the actual the work itself. And then another one here, multimodal cognitive therapy is another treatment used to help individuals cope with anger. This therapy teaches individuals relaxation techniques, problem solving skills, and techniques on response disruption. This type of therapy has proven to be effective for individuals that are highly stressed and are prone to rage.
There you
Boom. There's more emotions, Jon. Emotions,
There you
emotions,
go.
emotions, right? Stia. Situation, thought, emotion, action, right? In order. So once we get in deep into the emotion, we ignite the action, and then we're usually, boom, we can't pull ourselves back. But if we, anyway, yeah. So we become aware of our triggers, the stimulus. We become aware of our thinking, take a breath. We can stop it, boom, put out the fuel. And potentially the fire.
There you
And
go.
so this is really interesting
And
stuff.
that's,
So role
that's
playing I thought was interesting too, but go for it.
and that, again, coming back to the conversation we had before, that's not suppressing it. That's learning how to manage it, learning how to redirect it, and learning how to
Objectifying
really
it.
process it. Yeah. So that's we talked about the health implications of truly suppressing it, but we don't want to suppress it. We want to redirect and process it, and that's what these therapies help you to do, is really do
Yeah.
that. That's why it's healthy to do these.
I've done some role playing before. I this men's group I sat in, and it was very, very healthy in objectifying, your attitudes, your feelings about other people, but also, again, identifying those triggers and stuff like that. So, here's another, we talked about clearing being an excellent way to help, extinguish some of that, the fire and the wildfires of rage and anger. But here's another opportunity, just by, it's not necessarily, I think it's still like objectifying your rage, beginning to see it, analyze it, knows what triggers it. But then it's also it has energetic properties. So exercising it, like getting out, walking. Like if you're sitting around all day and you expect yourself to change emotionally very easily and very quickly, it's going to be hard, because we have physical bodies that need physical stimulation. And that physical stimulation and doing, breathing and meditation, or something that really begins to exercise that energy within our bodies, not just our mind, but within our bodies, can really help to create that awareness and then help us to change.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wrap it up here in a second, but I'm reading
No, with you, dude.
the Four Agreements. If you've
Great.
ever read the Four Agreements, it's a fantastic read. Really helps to kind of see things in a different way, but very short read too. But the Four Agreements, if you don't have time to give it a read, I'll summarize it for you. It's the first is be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. What it is you say, being truthful, but also, not trying to be hurtful or be defensive. Even when you come back, like being on the defensive can often cause you to be hurtful. So be impeccable with your word, first of all. Second one is to not take anything personally. And that's, from what other people do and what other people say, but also what you say to yourself. So it's a really interesting second agreement there. The third one is to not make any assumptions. And a lot of the pain and sadness that we have in our lives is that we assume something that somebody said meant something else, but not make any assumptions. But also don't make assumptions on the fact that others expect or others will do what you expect them to do, right? So that's the third one. And then the fourth one, it's kind of really a summary of those first three, is just do your best. Do your best, because you know that you're
Always do
fail.
your best.
Yeah, you're gonna have failures at those first three agreements. The fourth agreement is always do your best, and that best is different on one day to the next. So anyway, that's a quick book for you guys to read. Is the Four Agreements. Fantastic read.
Great book.
And I think it all applies to what it is we discussed here today in the Rage. So let's bring it home.
Let me just say one more thing. I'm going to bring it home by what you said, and just kind of address a comment here by Michael Starnes in LinkedIn here. He goes, I don't know if he's kidding on this or he's just giving us some beautiful fuel to talk about something important here as relating to rage and pride and controlling things. He says, I bend my back. I bend my back over for everybody. It's not reciprocated. Well, what Jon just said about making assumptions, you're assuming that, like that's going to happen. You're creating an expectation. Part of the Vipassana practice is detaching yourself from results, and just doing things in a heartfelt way and not expecting anything in return. And when that reciprocation, and when you don't receive that reciprocation, hurts your pride, begins to wake up anger. You begin to see them filter the world in the same way. And if you're always doing things in order to receive things, you're always going to be kind of in this tug of war with and playing games of sensation, what they say, in the sense of like, well, I feel good doing this, but I also feel good when somebody returns, but attaching from results, and just giving from a place of generosity, a place of love, a place of just helping something. And then maybe instead of like wanting expectations, just pay it forward. Hopefully that someone will do something nice for somebody else, and just letting it go. But making those assumptions, like you just said, Jon, can really stoke that fire of rage and anger, and really get you into that wildfire of rage. So
that's right.
Interesting. Great stuff here. So,
well, yeah, you want to wrap it up with a closing practice to help us address some of this rage there, Will?
What's that? Oh, yes, for sure. For sure. I'm just watching some more comments come in here. So thank you, Michael. Michael's just commenting here. But Yeah, I know. It's tough to let go of reciprocation and stuff like that. But when you do, I mean, it's going to create such a more peaceful life because you're not stuck to results. So, all right, let's do a. And what's great about taking this closing practice, and the timing couldn't be any better, John, for so many reasons. Let's exhale the breath all the way out. And what's great about these grounding practices, it gives us that opportunity to take a big inhale. It gives that opportunity to objectify our mind, our feelings, our body, and begin to sit in the seat of consciousness and our stillness. Exhale out. We just get to know ourselves by calming ourselves down and using the breath as that tool for calm, peace, and stepping into our heartfelt self where that loving kindness is just waiting to be exercised. Let's do a few more breaths. Let's do 5 more like that. Inhale. Out through the nose. A couple more in. Softly out. 2 more. One more. Good. And just take a moment here. And after all these things you heard today, what is one thing you can do to change your relationship to rage and anger? Really just rage. One thing you can do. Can you take a couple minutes to breathe every day? Can you walk a little bit more and get in your body? Do you need to apologize to somebody and clear the air? One thing you can do in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, and watch how that one thing, that one action can really help you create a cascade of cleansing, of clarity, of peace, of loving kindness, of compassion, of love. Yeah, okay, let's seal it in with one big breath. Inhale. Exhale out. Good. That's it, John. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Yeah, great stuff, man.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for your heart and your kind words today and sharing your personal experiences with rage. I think it's very helpful for our audience. It's helpful for me to hear that. So thank you for that. For our audience who tuned in, thank you for tuning in live. And for those who tune in later in the podcast form, thank you for tuning in there. And we'd love it if you would share this show with anyone you think could benefit from it. That's friends, family, coworkers, whoever. But get the Men Talking Mindfulness show shared. Not because we care. It's not about our ego or anything like that. It's because of what it is this show does for people. So thank you for allowing us to come into your lives. And until next time, take care. Peace.
Peace. Thank everybody. Peace.
Joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.